Funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Marks Paneth LLP, Capital One Bank, Collins Building Services, Meridian Capital Group. Additional support has been provided by grants from AKA Hotel Residences Corman Communities, Ariel Property Advisors, Amerant Bank, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, Chase Commercial Mortgage Lending, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Casamatides Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, Matone Group, New Banks, Newmark Knight Frank, Ocean First Bank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Services, Stonehenge NYC, SVN CPEX Real Estate Services, Tierra CRG, the Meringer Family Foundation, and these friends. Ooh, 9 months into a pandemic. What's going on around the country? But what's specifically going on in Westchester? So today, with the assistance of one of my guests, Joe, I've assembled a group of dynamic real estate leaders and a banker who's the money man to say developments in Westchester. My guests today include Bruce Berg, who is the executive vice president of the Capelli Organization and the CEO of Fuller Development. Joe Graziosi, who is the Vice President Project Manager for RXR Realty. Marty Berger, who is the Managing Member for Sabre Real Estate Advisors. And as I said, last but not least, the man with the money, Brad Dubeck, Market Manager for New York and New Jersey of the Bank of America. So, normally I start with the developer, but I'd rather talk about the man with the money. What's going on? Are you willing to lend to all of these individuals and other individuals in Westchester? Are you worried about the supply? Where do you see the Westchester market, Brad?
Going years back, New York City has always been in need of more housing options, especially affordable housing options. And before the pandemic, renters were starting to become priced out of not only Manhattan, but Long Island City and Brooklyn. So when you think about Westchester, it's a terrific alternative in that it is close by. It's an easy commute to the city via Metro North, has a terrific amenity base, and it's more affordable. So in a post-pandemic world, you ask where the market is, I think all of that's still true. And now Westchester also benefits from having less density than the city, which appeals to renters, and also appeals to a workforce that will likely be more agile in the future, which is to say that not everybody will need to commute into a Manhattan office building every single day, and that will make living in the suburbs easier. With respect to where the lending community is, it's an open question. My suspicion is with a recovery in the overall economy, that lenders will become more active and paying attention to the demographic shifts, in some cases away from suburban dense locations like Manhattan. Some of the suburban environments, in particular Westchester in this case, will be a big beneficiary. So we should see more activity in the form of development lending from the lending community, including banks.
So here's the question. All three of you, Bruce, Marty, and Joe, are active and in the ground in certain developments around Westchester. I did a show a couple of weeks ago, and I had a couple of developers from New York City, and they basically said, unless I'm in the ground or I'm forced to be in the ground, I don't want to be in the ground now. Bruce, I know you had some developments in White Plains, definitely New Rochelle, because the Capelli organization was like the king of New Rochelle, the first New Rochelle. Where do you see the market, and which places specifically in Westchester do you feel comfortable with?
Westchester has not been active in the residential development area for 15 years. There's been some limited development, so I think there's a lot of pent-up demand long-term for the marketplace. And I do think that, yes, there's been a stall due to the pandemic. But then more specifically to your question, we opened the building in March of March of 20. They're slightly smaller units, and we've been very successful in leasing the building up. We got it completely leased within less than a year. And I think it might have been somewhat a mix of the product because they were smaller than standard. We're under construction right now on another 28-story building in downtown New Rochelle, which is scheduled to open in about a year. And then we're also actively building for a couple of third parties, including, for example, RXR in New Rochelle. I think overall the market, we're still bullish. It's a little hard to tell how this is going to roll itself out in the next 6 months, but I think if the vaccines come out, I still believe in long-term development in Westchester. And then in terms of specific cities, I would be very bullish on New Rochelle, Yonkers, and White Plains, which are traditionally where the bulk of the development has happened because of the walkability, the access to train, and the ease of access into Manhattan.
I mean, Marty, you've been working on a project for a couple of years with Marist College. What about the other towns? Everybody talks, Yonkers, New Rochelle, White Plains. There are places called Mount Vernon. There are Rye. I mean, where do you see the other towns? Are the developers getting a little better opportunity to develop right now?
Well, it's a very difficult period. It always has been in Westchester. It's a very costly process. It typically takes over a year to get through the planning phase of a development. And the planning phase is costly. It's somewhere between $1 million and $3 million. The planning boards typically are inspecting and challenging all aspects that are proposed by a developer, properly so, doing their homework and due diligence, but it's a very extensive and expensive and time-consuming process. In the town of Poughkeepsie, we are underway with a significant mixed-use development. We have been pleasantly surprised and quite surprised at the amount of residential demand, multifamily demand from national builders who want to be in the suburbs because number one, that's where the customer it wants to be. Secondly, the cost of construction is so much less. Rather than fight the cities where you're doing steel and concrete, you're doing a horizontal development, 3-story, 4-story, which you can do in stick frame construction, which is a lot less expensive. It's a lot more affordable. When you do a reverse commute driving from White Plains up toward Brewster or Poughkeepsie, all you see in the opposite direction heading down is bumper to bumper traffic both ways during a commute. So it's evident that people are commuting from as far as Poughkeepsie and Dutchess County and Danbury, Connecticut, into White Plains, Westchester, and even over the Throgs Neck Bridge to Long Island and into Manhattan.
Joe?
One aspect, following up on Bruce's comment, is that Westchester has been very slow for development for the past 15 years. The supply has pretty much maintained its own level, the same level, up until a few years ago. It's only over the past 24, 36 months at the most that we've had any significant increase in units, which is satisfying a pent-up demand.
Joe, my executive producer and the 800-pound gorilla, as I said, RXR invaded Westchester, okay? Also Stanford, and in other places. But where do you stand today? You've opened up in Yonkers. You're in the ground in numerous properties in New Rochelle. Where do you see the opportunities? And what's the price differential for somebody to rent an apartment in Westchester as compared to some of the boroughs of Manhattan?
So, Michael, as you mentioned, RXR is developing in New Rochelle as well as Yonkers and other portions of both Westchester and Fairfield County. But in particular in Yonkers and New Rochelle, we recently, over the past year and a half, opened up a building in Yonkers as well as another one in New Rochelle, just over 700 units between the two. And we're in the ground, in fact, just topped out superstructure on our third building, our second building in New Rochelle, which is another 352 units. And I think when we look at Westchester in particular, as Marty alluded to, you've got more scalability and more opportunity to build at more competitive rates. And what you find is that you're able to build units that in some cases are larger than the units that you would be able to build in New York City. But more importantly, you're able to program those buildings a little bit more efficiently and offer a wide range of amenities and services in the buildings in Westchester that you might not be able to do with development constraints in other locations in New York, especially New York City. So what we see in Westchester in particular from a price point, we're able to provide units that are considerably larger or more amenitized at a fraction of the price. And it ranges, Michael, but we're seeing our pricing at about 30 to 45% less than New York City pricing in our assets that are currently in lease up. And we opened our buildings in New Rochelle and Yonkers middle of 2019, and another one in the middle of 2020. And we've seen really strong lease up even through COVID. And I think as we look back on our development opportunities in Westchester, dating back to 2014 or 15, when we really got in the works with the city of New Rochelle as an example on the rezoning, we knew this day would come. And I think that COVID has only acted as an accelerant to get people out of the boroughs, as well as come down from other parts of Westchester and Southern Connecticut, and really see what Westchester County has to offer, whether it's the walkability or the businesses that have already been in Westchester for decades, and we'll see, hopefully, as time goes on, more come as businesses expand outside of New York City. A really great opportunity to continue to develop on what we've already. To your earlier point, Michael, and what Marty touched on a little bit about is we're also seeing these opportunities beyond New Rochelle, Yonkers, and White Plains. In fact, Portchester is an opportunity where we're not currently developing, but we see as an opportunity to take a real hard look at the opportunities of developing in a place like Portchester. And they recently, back this past spring, passed their form-based code that is very similar to what New Rochelle experienced back in 2015, that will make it more attractive for developers like RXR to go develop affordable and market rate multifamily, as well as engage with the community and create a destination that otherwise may have not have existed years ago.
Here's a question, basically, for Brad as the lender. How do you make a decision of who you really want to lend to? Okay, is it only established, or are you giving the opportunity to the new kids on the block?
It's a good question. Well, our business is based on relationships and trust. We're going to do business with people that we know have a terrific track record of success, Mike. But at the same time, every lender is looking for new clients and new opportunities. We are real estate lenders, so we have to look at the fundamentals of the project and the business plan and all of the different metrics that go into making a credit decision. But the sponsorship piece of it, at least for the main domestic relationship banks, is going to be the most important.
Bruce, I have to address this question. As I said, the Capelli organization really created New Rock and other developments. How have you seen the change over the past 20 years in New Rochelle?
I mean, it's a world of difference since we started. We also built a couple of condos in New Rochelle, in between New Rock City and today. The city has done a tremendous job in their new planning and their form-based code that Joe mentioned earlier. It's attracted an awful lot of attention, and we're starting to see not only residential development in downtown, but there's tremendous medical uses moving into the city. And the combination is going to make New Rochelle a completely different city within the next couple of years. So I'm very bullish on New Rochelle.
Now, this is a question for all three of you. Who's moving into these apartments that you're building over there? Are these the baby boomers who are downsizing, or are they the millennials who are coming up and saying, hey, I don't want to pay as much. I want to have the opportunity to live up in Westchester. I want to have the quality of life.
Over the course of our development in New Rochelle and Yonkers and other places in Westchester, our target has always been both the young professional and the empty nester. And I think what we've seen is that group continue to lease in these buildings, but now we're reaching a lot further. For a long time, the millennial base that was renting in our buildings were local to Westchester. They had roots in Westchester and they had reason to be in Westchester, whether it's family or business. And now, as over the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen an even greater reach beyond the Westchester community. And we have folks in our buildings, whether they're millennials or empty nesters, but millennials and young professionals in particular, that are coming down from Southern Westchester, that are coming up from Brooklyn and Queens, who are coming over from New Jersey to really experience what Westchester has to offer. And while I can't say that it wasn't always a goal for us to get that reach beyond the Westchester community, it's happened a lot faster and a lot more demand than we had originally anticipated.
The market has really changed in the last, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years, where we are now finding a lot of empty nesters. It was a market that just didn't exist before. And there's good reason for it. People get to retirement age and they're not necessarily ready to move to Florida, or they want to move to Florida, but they need to maintain a home here or a place here because their business is here or their social life is here, their golf clubs are here, whatever the reasons are. And they're finding that the ability to be in a building in a downtown that they don't have to worry about, the lawn and snow plowing and maintenance, and that when they go to Florida, they can lock the door and the concierge is going to take their packages. It's been such a growing market. So we're finding, again, in the buildings that we've been involved with, and we've been partners with RXR, the average age has been, in my view, moving up, and the average income, household incomes have been increasing just because of this greater diversity of market.
Westchester was always a market with interesting space for retail. Certain retail was knocked down, certain office buildings were knocked down. Where do we see the retail market, especially in light of e-commerce and so on?
I think the retail certainly is challenging, as we all know, but in these cities, residents bring more residents, and more residents bring more retail and opportunities. All of these cities need to be 24/7 environments. It's good for the residents, it's good for the businesses, it's good for taxes, and it's always nice to see people on the street. More people on the street, more customers, and more residents come out to join them. Certainly, the restaurants and the entertainment are a very, very important aspect of everyone's life in these communities. You'll continue to see more and more of those opportunities. And the retail itself, although it's changing in dynamic of what it is to goods and services, it will mostly fill out most of the streetscapes in these cities. There's not a significant amount of streetscape retail. So I'm encouraged that as the cities become more populated as a result of the developments that we're bringing, the retail will be leased fully.
I was on the phone yesterday with a major owner of industrial property. Industrial was a market that nobody really cared about. It wasn't that. But today, with last mile distribution and everything, industrial is coming back. And Westchester is not far from New York City, and you need these small places. Are any of you involved with industrial development in Westchester?
RXR is not currently involved in Westchester with industrial, but we do have some sites in the boroughs that we've been developing over the past several years and executed on a lease with Amazon recently in Queens. And to your point, I think you'll see that last mile logistic trend work its way up into Westchester sooner rather than later, especially given the influx of residential population that's moving up this way in multifamily settings.
I agree with Joe. One of the challenges with Westchester, though, is there's not a lot of land available for industrial use. So it will be in my view, a challenge to find ways to do it. And I think Joe, for example, they're doing a multi-story building in one of the boroughs. It's the only way you can make it work these days. Is you're going to have to go almost not quite high rise, but mid rise industrial. Can't do single story any longer.
I'm going to bring up a hospitality in Westchester. Okay, a number of hotels are closing. I believe one or two are in development. How do you see the hospitality market doing in Westchester in the future?
A lot of the hotels in Westchester, as we know, are quite old and outside of the downtown city environment. The challenge in developing a hotel in the downtown communities is cost in terms of parking below grade and just the cost of the land. We've attempted to incorporate hotels twice recently in our developments, and both of them were unsuccessful simply because of the cost. You can't build a Ritz-Carlton today because of the union requirements, and at the same time, a less than full service hotel is very expensive, although they do quite well. The few new hotels that have come about are experiencing very significant occupancies, as much during the week than on weekends, which is quite surprising. So it's a needed product. There are hotel companies that are ready, willing, and able to come into cities like White Plains and New Rochelle and are looking for the opportunity to be able to do so.
Brad, missed the money?
Well, look, I think the story on hospitality, Mike, is still being written. If you surveyed a lot of lenders, my guess is it's not on the top of the list as far as asset types that they're looking to expand their portfolios in 2021. But I would say give the recovery some time. Let's see where leisure and business travel go following the successful vaccination programs in the country. And then the lending community will have a different view then. Today, I think the jury's still out.
Something that's taking place around the country and specifically even in Westchester is the life sciences. What's your thoughts about going into the development? Because a couple of the life sciences are doing very well. It's a good market. And since you're developers and you like being involved in different products, this is something you may not want to do hospitality. Maybe it's life science or studios that we have right now in Yonkers. Bruce?
Well, we recently attempted to convert 2 office developments into life sciences. And what you learn is that their requirements are very, very specific in terms of build out, dimension of configuration of facilities, as well as where they want to be given their employee base. We have not yet been able to find an exact match in Westchester for life sciences. I'm sure that it'll happen, but we haven't been able to create a match there yet.
Bruce?
You know, we have a couple of office buildings, and to the extent that there are life science tenants out there, we are always in the market to talk to them. We don't have a specific expertise in the area, as Marty pointed out. You know, they're very unique, but if we had the opportunity, we'd be jumping into it, because I do think that is a growth area in Westchester.
We haven't really discussed the office market. How are you doing with renting space? Are companies coming out to Westchester for satellite offices? Are they relocating from the city? Where do you see that happening? What's happening with the activity in the office market?
On our side, all of our tenants have been paying rent, which has been great. We have had a couple of new tenants. Most of them have been smaller. We had one good size 30,000 footer that signed a lease with us recently. We were expecting more demand from the city. We've been approached on a couple of instances. We haven't signed anything yet, and we're still hopeful that there will be either the demand for satellite offices or, you know, other tenants that are coming out of the boroughs that do want to relocate further north, just because it's so much more cost effective. But I have not seen a mass exodus yet. And I think, frankly, that most companies are still sort of sitting on the sidelines. They want to see how the elections went. They want to see how the pandemic's going to play out, when the vaccinations come out. And then I think we'll know a little bit more in another couple of months.
And to Bruce's point, Michael, I think we're still evaluating the changes in the work culture. A lot of people that usually sit in commercial buildings in New York City might still be working from home. So as companies really evaluate that work culture and take a look at the different ways to mitigate some of the commuting challenges that residents will have commuting into New York City, I think you'll start to see that hub and spoke office model where people will continue to have a presence in New York City because at the end of the day, that's going to be the backbone of the New York Metro. But you'll start to notice some satellite offices pop up, and I think we're not too far away from that.
I agree with Joe. I think that is going to happen. And similar to Bruce's experience, when COVID first occurred, we were expecting flocks of companies to move out into the suburbs. And we and others put a significant effort together to attract those clients. And frankly, they never came. I think they realized that there wasn't a need to open up a satellite office because their employees were very happy and content to work at home. I think that that's starting to get tiring. We are seeing some activity in our office, limited office environment, where individuals, professionals are looking for space just to get out of their home. And I think the compromise will be the hub and spoke result.
In order to really discuss Westchester in total, and maybe even Fairfield and other counties, I need to put another show later on in the season. But I'd like to thank everybody for being here. I'd like to specifically thank Bruce Berg, Joe Graziosi, Marty Berga, and last but not least, Brad Dubeck, and see you next week.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Mike.
Michael.